Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and welcome to episode 56 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast with me, Rory Lees-Oakes, and with me is my fellow traveller in the existential realm, Mr. Ken Existential Kelly. How are you doing?
I'm feeling rather existential today. Thank you very much for asking, Rory. Great to be here. A really good mixed bag, I guess, on today's episode. So episode 56, we're going to be opening up and we're going to be looking at subtle themes, identifying the themes that a client may bring. And we're going to be linking that to a question asked on our Facebook page. And then we're going into Theory with Rory, where today we're going to be looking at experiments, but not just any experiments, Rory. This is experiments in Gestalt.
It is. We're going to have a look at a part of Gestalt psychotherapy, which is exercises and experiments, where clients are asked to kind of test out their thinking and to see if it's really true or not. And it forms the basis of Gestalt psychotherapy, and also it forms the basis of a lecture that I've recently given on an introduction to Gestalt. So the whole thing really ties in nicely, Ken.
And speaking of things tying in, we're going to end today's episode as we began it, in an existential way, by speaking about existentialism and specifically skills linked to existentialism. And that is regarding another comment that we had on Facebook. But we'll get to that in a moment after we kick off and we speak about identifying themes. Now, this again came in from Facebook, Rory.
Yes, so we're grateful to Samantha Roberts, who posted in Facebook. She's one of our Facebook members, and I'm sure if you've listened to the podcast before, you know exactly what I'm going to say. But what I'm going to say is, if you want to join our group, which is growing literally by the hour, then go to Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor, that's 2 L's, we spell it, yes, in the English, UK, British way, and you'll find the closed group, knock on the door, we'll let you in, and you can just join our merry, happy throng of many thousands of students, practitioners, and also some tutors in the world of counselling and psychotherapy. So we're very grateful for Samantha writing and posting this. And if you've got any questions you'd like answering in the CT podcast, why don't you put them on the Facebook page and we'll do our best to answer them. So Samantha says, "Hi, I've been struggling to spot themes the client is bringing during triad work. I can spot the obvious ones they are talking about, but not the more subtle, under the surface themes and linking to various issues. I thought perhaps reading some case studies and trying to spot themes may help, but I can't find any. Any suggestions of where I could look or ideas that would help would be gratefully received." Well, I hope that this is going to be very useful to you. Listening to the music behind the words, Ken.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, the words of Rogers, in that we're not just there to listen to the words that the client brings, we're there to receive them in their entirety, how they sit, their eyes, where are their eyes, what are they doing with their hands as they're sitting. Everything is telling a story and projecting where that client is at.
Absolutely. And I think what I'd say to you, Samantha, is just let this person speak. And you'll find eventually that there'll be maybe little minor inconsistencies in what they say. So one of them is someone who says, "I'm really happy about that, but looks sad." And you see that all the time. "Yeah, it's really good, that." And the response would be, "I hear you saying it's really good, but you look sad when you when you tell me." And sometimes it is about reflecting all of the client. The client is a whole kind of process. So it's not just what they say, it's just how they look, how they act, the tone of voice. And sometimes when you pick up on that, you can then lead into the more deeper emotional material. The way I used to teach it, it's like a two-lane road. One lane is the story, the narrative, and the other lane, which is underneath it, is the emotions. And every so often, a client will open a little door where you can drop into the emotions, but you have to be able to pick them up, Ken. Can be quite an art, can't it?
It can. It's nuanced, I guess. And I like what you said there. And you're speaking about focusing on the incongruence that the client may bring, where as you said, I'm okay at the moment, I'm feeling happy, but they look sad, and you will point out that incongruence. And if we look to person-centered therapy and the work of Carl Rogers, he speaks about there being an incongruence in the client as they will come in. And what you're saying about just being with them and allowing the client to lead. And from the question, I gather that this is simulated skills work that you're doing maybe in your college or in your university. And you may find that this changes slightly when you go out and you go into placement and you have a client in front of you. And so often, it's not about us spotting the themes. Like, aha, there it is. There is the theme. Let's go over there. It's just about being there with the client, because sometimes the client doesn't know what the theme is, and they will find their way. Sometimes they are lost. Sometimes they don't know where they're going. Sometimes they don't know what's causing their pain. And we just be with them as they look around and find their way. And when they do find their way, it is their way. And then we're with them as they go their way, as opposed to us identifying a theme and taking them our way.
Yes, absolutely. It's about letting the client find their own path and not directing. And what I always used to say to my students was, listen to the music behind the words. The narrative, what people say, is one thing, but how it's said and the emotion connected to the words. Are they said lightly? Are they said heavily? Are they said with sadness? Those are the bits of music that therapists will attune to, empathically attune to, and be able to reflect a feeling back to the client. So I'd say, if you're doing level 3, probably early days, just stick with it, and it will come. I think one of the things in skills, it will just come.
I like that. I like what you've said there, and it's not that we develop a special sense to be able to know what is troubling the client or the theme of that. It really is just about being 100% with them, and like you say, Rory, it is nuanced. And it takes some time, and it takes being out there and letting the clients show us the way.
Yes, and indeed show us themselves. One of the big differences between skills and working as a therapist with a client is that clients will show us a wider range of emotions, where in class people may be a bit audited, I think. Not always, but it sometimes happens.
And I'm also mindful that, I'm very thankful for the question, of course. I'm also mindful that we're speaking now a lot about person-centered therapy and the skills and the way of being within that relationship. But there are other ways and there are other modalities, which leads me on, Rory. Did you see what I did there? Onto theory with Rory, where we're going to be doing experiments. You're going to be speaking about experiments where the client is given an experiment to do within their own lives. And this is experimentation in Gestalt, Rory.
It is, and I'm going to be talking about Gestalt therapy. I've recently given a lecture on Gestalt in the CSR, and I'm going to be taking a section of that and just talking a little bit about a crucial part of Gestalt therapy, which is experiments. And one of those is familiar to lots and lots of people, even those really not in the world of counselling and psychotherapy, and that, of course, is empty chair technique. That's an experiment.
I like it. And without any further ado, let's go into theory with Rory.
Counselling Theory with Rory Lees-Oakes.
One of the features of Gestalt therapy is called experiments. And I'm sure lots of you may have done the exercise called a Gestalt letter, where you're encouraged in training to write a letter to someone you've had unfinished business with and put it onto paper. And at the end of the exercise, you have a choice. You can either send it, you can either destroy it, or you can keep it. But here's the thing, the choice is yours. You've taken control over that feeling by placing it on paper and then deciding what you're going to do with it. And this really is a big feature of Gestalt therapy, the idea that clients undertake roles and experiments to try to get them to kind of look at the situation in slightly different ways. One of these is sometimes called staying with the feeling, and Gestalt really does emphasise and puts a lot of stock in immediate feelings. And the therapist may say, what are you feeling now? Stay with it. Give that feeling a voice. And sometimes maybe say, I know you feel depressed. What does give that depression a voice? Let it speak out as if it was here. And while it might seem a little odd to try and get an emotion to speak, what happens is by giving it a voice, it becomes quite cathartic. It allows the client to say maybe what's unsaid and to bring it into the therapy room. Another is called taking responsibility. How often have we heard people say, well, that person makes me angry, that person makes me sad, that person makes me bored. In Gestalt therapy, the experiment would be to get the client to say, I am angry and I take responsibility for it. I am fed up and I take responsibility for it. One that's sometimes used in group therapy is called playing projection. And this is where a member might be critical of others. So a good example of that is someone saying, I don't like that person, they criticise everybody. And what the facilitator might say is, well, why don't you stand up and you play that part and you try that and see where that feels for you. And it's amazing, by putting someone else in someone else's shoes, get a completely different perspective of it. One is called, another one, which I quite like, and I sometimes use a little bit of in my practice, is called the exaggeration experiment. And this involves people purposely exaggerating subtle non-verbal behaviours. When I first started in training, my former trainer was trained in Gestalt, and she would tell me regularly stories, or tell the class stories, of clients who, when they talked about their partners, would kick the leg. And she would encourage them to give it a good kick, see how that feels, explore it. And it's about a disconnect. It's about the fact that subconsciously the legs moving, wanting to kick, and trying to get the client in contact with that, trying to get them in contact to their own processes so they're not disconnected from them. Finally, perhaps two of the most well-known techniques and experiments in Gestalt. The first one's called empty chair, and this is where you sit the client in one chair and they face an empty chair. And what they do is they try and work out external conflict. So sometimes the empty chair will contain someone they're having difficulties with, a relative, a partner, a boss at work, and they can talk directly to the empty chair as if that person was there and say what they feel, get it out. Again, it can feel very cathartic. Another technique of the empty chair, and one that perhaps isn't as well known, is top dog, underdog. The top dog is the person who kind of motivates us along and takes control of our lives. And the underdog tends to be a bit of a procrastinator. I'll do it tomorrow. And in Gestalt, the underdog sometimes has the upper hand most of the time. So by putting the underdog personality in the chair, the client can tell them what they think about their procrastination or lack of effort, or all the things that are really holding them back. And again, it can put into clear focus what the client really wants to change and how they're going to do it. And finally, dream work. Gestalt and dreams are really intertwined. Gestalt would say that dreams are a subconscious process of what's going on for us that appear when we're asleep. And part of it is to get the client to act as a director. So if there's a characters in the dream, is to direct the characters, but also get them to say, I am that character, and explore what the story of that character is. It can be quite powerful. And also to get the client to say that the dream is 100% responsibility about the dream and how they dream. It's quite interesting. Sometimes done it in training where someone says, I'm falling. Well, I'm falling. Where are you falling? Falling into the water. Well, say, I am the water. Well, I am the water. Well, what does that say to you? What can you see or feel or experience? And it's amazing how people can join the dots of the life just by experiencing the dreams. So that is experiments in Gestalt therapy.
Thank you very much, Rory. Experimental indeed, and there's a great handout to go along with that. And that's the different experiments in Gestalt. And if you want to get hold of Rory's super duper handout, it's easy to get. You just go to counsellingtutor.com, click on the podcasts tab. You'll find that on the homepage. Go to episode 56. That's this episode. All the show notes are there. And of course, you can download Rory's handout from within that page. And if you are a member of the Counselling Study Resource or the Handouts Vault, well, that resource has already been added for you. So no need to download it. It's right there and you can go and enjoy it. Thank you very much for that, Rory. And moving on from experiments in Gestalt, we're going to be looking at I always trip up on this one. Existentialism. And we're going to primarily be looking at the skills in that. But this is linked into a Facebook comment that came in, Rory.
It is. It's from Emma Hales. So hi, Emma. Again, one of our Facebook members. And they're just our Facebook members are just the best, Ken. They ask the best questions.
Oh,
That's
yes.
all. And I have to admit, though, I do sometimes think, how am I going to answer that? So I have to nip
do we not recognise, Rory, that the best questions just inform even better questions, and we debate it, and I think very often we just come up with more questions.
It's true, and of course, Socrates was a famous philosopher who said, "I know nothing." And that links really into this question that Emma's asked. She says, hello, everyone. New to the group. Well, welcome, Emma. I'm doing a level 3 course. I wonder if I could pick your brains. Right, okay, so you might be able to hear that sound of my brains being picked. In the next session, we'll be covering existentialism and doing skills practice. Could any of you lovely people enlighten me what skills will aid my skills practice for existentialism? Well, what a great question.
Isn't it?
Yeah, and what I'd say is to understand the skills you need to understand existentialism. So very, very briefly, existential philosophy 101. First of all, it's not a philosophy. It's a kind of way of thinking. And I'm going to be doing a lecture on this very shortly on existential therapy. So I'll outline that for those of you who are members of the CSR. But effectively, existentialism is the idea that our lives are finite, that we're going to die at some point, and making sense of our life, making sense of life's meaning to us. So there's some really good books out there. One's called Staring at the Sun by Irving Yalom, about people who are dying, who are literally looking at the end of life. And the other one is, of course, Man's Search for Meaning, which is just a super book, which is all about an experience of a psychiatrist in a concentration camp and understanding the meanings of the world. And he went on to develop logo therapy. So really, really useful. So in terms of the skills, well, the skills really are helping people explore their own view of the world. So I mentioned Socrates, and there's something called Socratic questions. And basically you're asking people what it means to them. So it's not unlike standard counselling skills when you're existential therapist, but the focus really is on meanings as opposed to kind of feelings or kind of process. It's about what it means. And, you know, when someone brings you an issue, saying, what does that mean to you? And trying to get them to see their own kind of place in the world. I have to say, existential therapy is a very, very tricky therapy because, as I'll explain, there isn't actually a lot of theory to it. There isn't a lot of theory at all.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's very frame of reference based, and we do try to be in the client's frame of reference, but it's really drilling down into their frame of reference, getting the client, I guess, to examine their own frame of reference and look for what the meanings are to them. So it's less about them looking to us for the answer, but looking to what the meanings are that resonate with them, and that is the right journey for them. And it will be different with every single person that you share that relationship with.
Yes, and I talked earlier about a book, A Man's Search for Meaning. It was written by a man called Viktor Frankl, who was really one of the founders of existential therapy. Rollo May, again, was an American who wrote the first book on American book anyway, on existentialism. So I would look up Rollo May, I would look up Viktor Frankl on the internet. I do some research around those two people. Mick Cooper, of course, who's a big voice in UK or British existentialism. I've got his book in my library here, and just have a think about it. But what I would say is, when you're using your skills, really, as Viktor Frankl pointed out, you're looking for the client's search for meaning. And that is the direction, really, of the therapy.
And I guess if we were to name some skills that might aid in that process, silence would be a good skill, where the client is looking and considering within self, and we're not interrupting that. We're allowing that silence and being comfortable enough to allow the client to look and find the meaning within that silence for them. Reflection. So as opposed to us kind of taking what a client is saying and looking at that and exploring it further, just reflecting it straight back to them, so that the client is almost hearing their own words coming back. And sometimes that will lead the client to re-examine that is coming back, which is their own words. So they're looking for the meaning in their own words that they gave out. So those are two skills that come to mind for me.
Yes, and I think also questions about what does that mean to you?
Yes.
Trying to find, as you're saying, the whole point of existential therapy is to find out what the meanings are for the client. So as opposed to person-centered therapy, I guess, where you're into someone's frame of reference, trying to find the whole emotional palette that comes with that. With existential therapy, to my understanding, and I'm not an existential therapist, is that you're looking to help find the person find the meanings. So Viktor Frankl, really good. Love's Executioner by Yalom. Just the book, really, for showing how an existential therapist works with clients. And those will really guide you. It's an interesting therapy, existential therapy. One that's kind of a bit underrated, I think.
It is interesting. It's, I guess, based in phenomenology, in that it is the way that person, that individual, is seeing the world, and we see it uniquely, all of us, and for them to seek their meaning and their own phenomenological view of the world. And it's tricky, like you say, Rory, because it's not about us necessarily being in their frame of reference. It's about them examining and drilling down and looking for meaning within their own frame of reference. And it is interesting. Great books, great resources, and definitely a topic that I think we could speak more about. Specifically, if you're studying existentialism, please, on the Facebook page, let's share some ideas and what it means to you. That's existential, isn't it? What it means to you.
that is existential. So it's been a great podcast. Episode 56 has been really, really good. We've started off with themes in clients and skills, looking at themes, how to listen to the music behind the words. I've talked about experiments in Gestalt. And finally, we've had an existential discussion about existentialism and skills, and had a look at some of the really big names in the world of existential counselling and psychotherapy. Just been a fantastic session today. And it's always, of course, informed by you, the viewers and the listeners, who ask us these questions, and we have to get into the books and give you the answers. Isn't that right, Ken?
It is indeed. I've enjoyed it. I've learnt. I've grown. As always, I'm grateful to be here, and I look forward to our next episode, 57, coming up next week.
Indeed. And as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take care. If you enjoy the topics and handouts here on the Counselling Tutor Podcast, then you will love the Counselling Study Resource. CSR was built by myself, Ken, and Rory These Oaks to give you the support you need during your counselling studies. So get access to the world's most comprehensive collection of resources aimed at supporting you in your journey to become a counsellor. Take the stress out of your studies by visiting counsellingtutor.com/CSR. That's counsellingtutor.com/CSR.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.